Welcome to Free Principles Conversations with Christian McNeill, a series of conversations with Free Principles practitioners exploring a new explanation of how humans work. Insight into this understanding can help transform quality of life, relationships, and state of mind.
Well, hello and welcome to Three Principles Conversations with me, Christian McNeill. This podcast is about a new understanding, which is commonly known as Three Principles paradigm. Today, I am in conversation with a friend and colleague, Dave Kibby. Dave is, in his own words, a coach, a trusted advisor to entrepreneurs and leaders, known for his deep understanding of how human experience works. And his work blends personal transformation with high-stakes strategic support, helping clients move beyond pressure and noise into clarity, confidence, and lasting impact. So, welcome, Dave. Thank you very much for making the time to do this.
And it's a pleasure. I'm just recovering from the introduction.
Listen, you wrote it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's
Must
great.
have been a free coffee day, that one.
But yeah, I mean, my reason for doing these podcasts is that around about the same time that you stumbled across this work, so did I, and it really made a massive difference in my life after kind of 20 years of seeking, really, which had made some of which had made some difference, but you know, there's still a lot of struggle and searching going on, and I stumbled into this. It was phenomenal, and from quite shortly after that, I've been very committed to being sort of part of making it more widely available, more widely known, because I think one of the things, I think we both, you correct me if I'm wrong, but we both first stumbled across this through Jamie Smart, another coach and colleague and based in the UK. And he used to have this, he used to describe it as the best kept secret in psychology. And I think that's not wrong. And, you know, there's still something of that. So I'm very interested in making this very, what I would consider quite an accessible and portable understanding available to more people and more, you know, more widely known. So that's kind of the come from, as it were. But before we maybe get into that, I'd love you to tell listeners more about who you are, what's your background, your story, and what has shaped your worldview up until today. So it's a very wide question. Go wherever you want.
Oh, wow. Blimey, yeah. Well, I suppose perhaps a good place to start, and if you'd rather I start somewhere else, I could do that too, is what was going on when I came across the principles. So, and some of this I didn't know at the time. So obviously this is viewed through a lens of like 15 years of exploration, etc. But I was confused. I think is probably the politest way of saying it. So I was doing pretty well in my career. I'm a pretty driven creature. If I see things that I want, I will go after them. I don't have any problem with that kind of stuff. But I think perhaps like many people at different levels, I had if you like, lots of the success on the outside and a vast amount of misery on the inside. And I couldn't understand it. And I didn't know who to talk to about it. I perhaps, like many people, thought, well, maybe it's me. You know, maybe it's a something wrong thing or something that happened previously in life or whatever. And so I set about trying to find ways to manage that and to cope with it and hope it would be a bit better. And I did that via NLP, and it worked to some degree. It did. There was some relief or whatever. But I remember a point at which I was watching someone who I admired their NLP skills enormously. They had a huge tool bag, and skill sets and other therapeutic trainings, including, HUNA and all sorts of stuff. And and this wasn't a deliberate thing. It just happened one day when I was with them. I kind of looked and went, they're not that happy, relatively. So they got all these tools and all these techniques and all these methodologies, and still, it didn't seem like they were full of the zest of life. Anyway, to move the story forward slightly, I was in a mastermind at the time with a young, very charismatic marketer, and there was a guy at the table called Jamie Smart. I'd never come across Jamie. I didn't know him. I didn't know about his company Salad, which was an NLP training company. I hadn't come through that. But we got on at the table, and we were sort of going around in like a hot seat round robin thing, and people were saying, well, what were your challenges? And I wasn't so keen to talk about business challenges, because business challenges are just business challenges. You stick at them for long enough and you'll probably figure something out to do. I sort of vaguely said, I can't understand why I'm not happier. I don't get it. I've worked hard. I've achieved lots of things I want to do. And I'd also figured out that just by setting bigger goals or trying harder, that wasn't going to cut the mustard either. And Jamie kind of leant forward and said, I was going to try and do a Canadian accent, but maybe I won't. He said, I know what it is. And like when you're struggling and somebody says, I know what that is, you basically want to just bite their hand off, don't you? So we arranged and met up in London and started chatting or whatever. And when I first heard about the principles and the role of thought, it was like, oh, thank goodness. I've been driving myself bonkers trying to figure out with a misunderstanding built into my figuring out. And that's the bit that we don't know. So my figuring out contained something that wasn't actually true.
Yeah, you were using the wrong map.
So,
as we all were. I mean, as we all
totally,
were.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. Yeah, much more adequate description. You should talk now. Like, much more adequate description than I have. It was like, you remember, years ago, we used to wander around a city with an A to Z. You didn't have Google Maps, an A to Z. So it's like being in the middle of Manchester with a London A to Z, wondering why you can't navigate. And yeah, you just described it perfectly. That's what it was. I had the wrong map, the wrong set of instructions, and of course, I didn't know that I had that. We're not walking around deliberately with the wrong set of instructions. We don't know what we don't know, and then when somebody gives you instructions that make sense, then there's this sort of natural self-correction. So you imagine that you're in central Manchester and you've got the A to Z of London, and then somebody goes, you've got the wrong map, mate, and gives you the right one. Then there's a natural process. You'd be like, oh man, of course. And you'd start to flick through it and maybe find the page that you're on, and then maybe zoom in a little closer. And probably the last 15 years, if I were to summarize it, have been like that, a self-correction, a continual seeing of the misunderstanding.
Yes. And it sounds like that first conversation that you had resulted in, one or more significant insights. Yeah, and the map metaphor doesn't necessarily convey just what a powerful experience that is, and powerful and yet completely ordinary and everyday. But maybe you could say a bit more about that, because it is a key aspect to this understanding, our capacity for that.
Yeah, totally. I have a a pivotal moment which hadn't made sense, and then when I came across the principles, did make sense.
Oh,
So
do say more about that.
Yeah, the pivotal moment was really, really ordinary. Like I was at work one day, and I used to work for an importing company, and we'd been in a meeting, and it was going well. We were doing well as a company. We turned the company around, and things were doing well, and we were expanding. We were able to hire more people. It was lovely, and in many ways, I was doing the work that I'd always wanted to do. I really enjoyed it and whatever. And I kind of skipped out of the meeting one day, like, hey ho, and I was just popping to the toilet, and that was that. And then the following day, pretty much the same people, different meeting, but pretty much the same people, because it wasn't a very big company. So it's often the same people at meetings, and pretty much the same time of day. And I was like a bear with a sore head. I was like, nobody understands what I'm saying. We're stuck. This is ridiculous. It's not going as well as I think. Why did I ever leave teaching? Which was like 10 years earlier anyway. And I left the room just to get a breather, really. And we could talk about that, about the role of wisdom. So I left the room and I put my hand on the door to go to the loo again. And as I put my hand on the door, it was like one of those sliding door moments, the movie Sliding Doors.
Yeah. Second
And I was
time
like,
I've heard that referenced today.
yeah, oh, really?
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my goodness, how come yesterday this was the best thing since sliced bread, and today this sucks? Like I just want to go and sit in a corner and hope it all goes away. Like that makes no sense to me. And then, of course, when I came across the principles and understood the role of thought, I'm like, well, that makes total sense. I'm having an internally generated experience of an apparently external event. And I can have any experience of anything at any point.
So just to make that, crystal clear and ordinary, that, the meeting is the meeting. In my world, there is a meeting going on. We can get more and more kind of mystical about that. But there's a meeting going on, and but 100% of the experience of it is internally generated. And that varies from moment to moment, day to day, person to person.
And the key thing, the really key thing for me was, oh, okay. And my responding, my behaving, if you like, is born out of my experience of the meeting and not of the meeting. And that for me was pivotal, because that severed it's their fault. Because that was the meeting. Like you said, the meeting's going on, there's people there, there's conversations. But if my responding is coming from my own internally generated experience of it, it's no one else's fault. It's just the experience I happen to be generating in that moment. And that was probably because I had a lot of blame and a lot of judgment in a lot of areas for a lot of people, quite honestly, where it was their fault about things. And it blew a socking great hole in that.
Yeah. There's an expression one of our other colleagues uses, and Keith Blevins, and he says this: once we have an insight into the system, into this work, we're able to see the circumstances, we're able to see the facts without our feelings about it. And somehow the simplicity of that is enormously helpful for me, because it's also implicit that our feelings will come and go depending on what's going on and going through our heads at any given moment. But it's not pretending that there aren't circumstances or even that there aren't steps to be taken, but it enables us to come back to that neutrality much more readily, in my experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And I love that you said it's not that there aren't steps or there aren't things. It brings us back to the truth of what's going on, which includes our responding. It's not like that's a separate thing. It brings you back to the allness of what's happening, everything that's happening, and you can see it just. I think a number of people sort of describe it as seeing it with a right mind. You're like, oh, okay, they're doing those things, they're saying those things. That's matter of fact, and I'm responding in this way, and that's also very matter of fact. It's just that my responding is born out of my own internally generated view of that happening, and that can change, and I can have a hand in that changing when I wake up to it. Yeah. And similarly, somebody else would look at the same thing and go, well, that's just not how I see it at all. And you start to get I like your map analogy you used earlier on, because you start to get a more useful map of the world than you had previously, because it's got some fact in it, and it starts to become more devoid of superstitious thinking. So my superstitious thinking was telling me that the meeting was the cause of my feelings. And when I woke up to the principles, to the role of thinking, if you like, it was like, oh, okay, it does look like that, and it still looks like that to me today. It still looks like stuff can annoy me, people can annoy me, people's driving can annoy me, but the truth of it is still there for me to see in any moment. That's just me responding to me. The out there-ness is nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's no implication that one has to kind of just be utterly passive in a situation that we're not comfortable with. And I was just thinking, here's an example. I went to a Pilates class last night, which is kind of one of my things, and it was a different teacher. And man, it was done at jig pace, and it was an hour-long class. It was a substitute teacher. It was an hour-long class, and my heart sank when the headphones and the mic came out, because it was a very small room, and that was really quite unnecessary. Fortunately, that wasn't working. But then we were starting to race through it at top speed with, really blaring music and kind of stuff that I just hate. And 10 minutes in, I realized I'm loathing this, and there's 50 minutes to go. I just thought, you know what, I'm going. And it wasn't her fault. It's my thinking about it. Other people in the class seemed to either, like it or be, okay with it, or certainly, but I just quietly took myself out. And it's absolutely not about making her wrong, but there's a recognition of, I don't love that, and I don't have to do it. Now, that dislike is coming from my own preferences, my own thinking, if you like, my own set of beliefs. But it's equally, I don't need to spend my time doing it, because this is not just about thought. The wisdom part is there, the creative part, the resourceful part that gives us, I think, the opportunity to have much more choice and freedom and fun in life, frankly.
I love that, because otherwise what can happen, and I'm sure we've both seen this over the years, and maybe even this happened for us as well, is you can get caught in the pattern of, oh, okay, well, it can't be the environment that's making me feel this way. I ought to stick it out then.
And it's that second bit that's false, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Now you're into a new prison called what I should and shouldn't do, which is equally bloody miserable, quite frankly. like that's also no fun. So you're there's more freedom to be able to respond, because maybe somebody might be listening to this and think, oh, there's a situation I'm in, all right, and I don't like it, but I'm hesitant to remove myself from it. Oh, well, it's okay, so it's not coming from the situation, the feeling's coming from me. I should just stick to it. No, not even vaguely. Not even vaguely. You might think, actually, this just sucks. It's not for me. I don't want to be around it, and I'm out. And you've got a greater freedom to be with the truth of who you are in the world. It's like a dash of cold water. You don't have to sort of pander to particular ways of being, or feel restricted, or any of those things which this could sound like. And I've heard that over the years. You're completely free to be as you want to be.
Yeah. And do you know what? I don't know whether I'm kind of late to the party here, but one of the things that's become very clear to me in the last year or two is that much distress that people experience is all coming from our own thinking, whether we're conscious of that thinking or not, whether it's visible or not. But the distress is often about an internal conflict. It's about not changing the things we can. It's about, it's about having, not being true to oneself when one could be. I mean, obviously there are situations when, you can't be, but that you're in prison or something like that. But there is a more limited number of options in certain circumstances. But what I have noticed is nearly always that lack of peace, that lack of being able to settle down, is because there's an internal dilemma not being addressed or sorted.
Yeah, completely. It's the should and shouldn't. It's the harmony hairspray dilemma. Something will arise, and you'll be in a situation, or you'll see something. You think, I don't want to be part of this, or I don't want to be a part of this, or actually, I need to take a stand against it. Like, this isn't right. This shouldn't be going on. And then, if you're not careful, you can use your misunderstanding, which looks like an understanding, against yourself, and go, yeah, but hang on. The feeling can't be coming from this situation, so I should just stick at it. No, not even vaguely. No, not at all. You're being guided to look after yourself, to live within your well-being, and sometimes that will require taking quite a vehement stand against things.
Yeah. Dave, you mentioned being guided there, and you spoke a minute ago about the wisdom part. Could you say more about what that means to you? What you're referring to there?
Yeah, totally. So I go back to my first story about the meetings in the office, and the popping to the loo, if you like. The first day it was need to go. The second day, I just needed to be out of the room, and that's what I would call wisdom. There's like, and it comes in all sorts of different forms or whatever. But often for me, it shows up as you're a bit overwrought here, right? Remove yourself. So I give a really fresh example. Actually, yesterday I just we have a particular situation with my son's uni accommodation going on, and something's gone wrong. And in my view, the people handling it aren't, and are requiring a lot more assistance than I think is. And I got really quite cross with the person yesterday, and I said to them, it genuinely isn't personal, but I'm really cross about what's going on here. But it got to me, right? The phone call had ended, but the phone call was still playing out in my mind, and my mind can go pretty racy and pretty busy and whatever. And over the course of the day, it just sort of started to wear me down a bit. And when I get tired, agitated, I get narky, and I tend to get narky with the people nearest to me. My family.
How unusual.
Yeah, exactly, right. What a shocker. And so eventually, I just took myself off for a walk. And they're all used to me, obviously, so they know what's going on, and we've shared enough of this stuff over the years that they genuinely know it's nothing to do with them. This is just me rattling around my own cage for a while. And so I just went for a walk, and then I just didn't particularly feel ready to come back and be civil, ready to be right-minded. And as luck would have it, the rain really started to come down, so I just nipped into the coffee shop in the village and just sat and had a cup of tea for a quarter of an hour. Now, those things to me they're evidence of my well-being always working for me, evidence of my wisdom always showing up. Not you sort of need to push on through and go home and sort it all. It's way gentler. I used to be like a bull in a china shop. So.
Well, and what I love about that, Dave, is that you're describing in that and in other the meeting situation that it's omnipresent. It's always available if we tune into it. And it's because sometimes I think there can be another misunderstanding in this work, that you kind of have to get yourself in a good space first to receive wisdom and insight. And it's nothing could be further from the truth for me. I mean, I think it's a capacity that's always there. I may or may not be receptive to it, but it's fresh thinking is always coming through. And
yeah, I love that. I really love that. And there was something you said there that really resonated to my experience. It's like I didn't have to be in a good space. It's more like there's a good space that's permanently there, and it's permanently inviting me into it. Once there's enough quiet in my personal thinking, to hear the invitation. So it's not a sort of personal thing. It's like it's bigger than that. It's like we're taken care of if we're open to the fact that we're taken care of. But because we live in a very I suppose personal centric society and way of being, we really think it's all down to us. And I guess one of the big things I've seen over the last 15 years is it doesn't have to be like that. Like I have so many examples where I know that it's almost like a sort of guardian angel lifts you up and goes, "Why don't you go for a walk? It'd be a good idea if you went for a walk now, and then don't go home yet. Go and have a cup of tea." And there is that sort of sense of this greater intelligence, this wisdom that is always inviting us into right-mindedness and connection to our being, I guess, the truth of who we are before all the ideas of who we are get layered on top of it. And that's really nice to know, particularly if you're, a bit of a frantic-minded beaver like I am. It's it's really helpful to know that that's, even when I'm awake at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, solving, as I believe, most of the universe's challenges.
I'm glad you're on the job.
Yeah, right. It's like even within that, I know that there'll be a moment where it's like, just go and have a cup of tea, or just like you don't have to think about it. Otherwise, you're just adding more thinking onto more thinking onto more thinking, and we all kind of know how that plays out.
Yeah, I think that is such a useful observation, and I'm just as you were talking, I'm realizing my the common wisdom prompt that I get when is just stop, because there's part of me thinking it's only 3 o'clock. There's things to be done, and then just stop. Because I've come to see that I am not operating at the same rate, for my full working day. And in fact, my full working day varies, very much from one day to the next. But there's certain types of work, writing or planning things or creating events or whatever I can do, effortlessly at top speed first thing in the morning. And it's not to do with the morning, but my mind is fresh and I'm not, and then often at a later point in the day, but it's not again to do necessarily with the time or the clock, but I can recognize, I'm just, I'm done. There's nothing, I just need to rest and forget about you haven't done enough hours yet sort of nonsense that can crop up. That's an unhelpful thought.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it really, I was listening to what you were saying there and reflecting on how much sort of learned superstitious behavior there is, particularly in workplaces where how you have to be and, how you have to be seen to be. And it's like a cool breeze gets blown over all of that. And you start to see it for the ridiculous nonsense it is. I remember I was doing a consulting project a few years back, and it was a really lovely company, and they're really, really nice people. And my sponsor sort of said, "Okay, well, can you take?" It was really funny. It was really sweet. Can you take your lunch break at 1:30? And I was like, "Oh no, I can't do that. I'm a midday lunch kind of creature, because I'm early morning and then whatever." And he's like, "Oh," and he started to get agitated. You could just feel it instantly. It was but the rest of the team, that's when they have lunch. And I'd like you to have lunch with the rest of the team. And I watched him sort of get more and more wound up, which was just sort of funny. I mean, it might not have been funny on a different day, but it was that day. I said, "What's really going on? I can't believe you're that wound up about what time I want to eat. like that just seems odd to me." And he laughed, and he said, "No, I think I've got a thing about control, and that if I lose control, like they'll see you've got more freedom than them, and they won't want to work as hard or whatever. I said, do you think any of that's really true? He went, no, it's all crap, isn't it? and it just sorted itself out, and that seeing that that's available for all of us, like, and he didn't have an understanding in that sense, but he was just able to relax and be with it and see the truth of what was going on, which it was just a control issue. And like, there was no particular reason for me to follow these sort of slightly quirky rules. And Julie, I didn't. I ate when I was hungry because that seemed like a good time to eat to me.
Yeah, and it's a lovely example of. I mean, we haven't wholly touched on this, but it comes back, I suppose, to the more accurate map. That what this work is about is it is about uncovering true principles or psychospiritual laws that apply to everybody all the time, whether they know it or not. And so that's why he was able to have that breakthrough, because the first one was a thought created a limitation. And and that's one of the things that's so helpful. I don't know if you find this, but for me, certainly working with clients, I'm looking for evidence in their lives and in their pasts that shows them that this has always been going on. And I thought of one, on the work thing. And my last job in law, I worked along with about 10 or 12 colleagues. I mean, we're all doing pretty much precisely the same work. It was quite high level, but we had very, very similar workloads. And the man who was outstandingly the best was last in, first out, took a half day, just awarded himself a half day once a week. He was also the happiest man I've ever worked, and he was a real expert in the field. And then the most miserable man was there. He had suffered from presenteeism. He was massively behind, failing to make any of these deadlines or anything like that. And just a very interesting example of I think the first man naturally was more aligned with what we're talking about, and just didn't sweat anything and just sort of saw the racing line and got through it. But he was also the person that people would go to for advice. I mean, it wasn't some slapdash, lazy idiot or anything like that. He was really on top of it. So yeah, it was a kind of interesting example to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic example. And again, when you were saying about your client work, pointing people to examples of when it's already happening, because it could be easy to hear a conversation like this and go, oh, okay, so it wasn't happening, but if I understand this, it will happen. And it's like, no, it's always been happening. It's just that you didn't, or you had other names for it, or it hadn't been joined together with a fresh understanding of how experience works. Because all of us, we don't know what we don't know. So I didn't know back in 2009 or whenever it was that this sort of inquiry first started. I didn't know that I had a bunch of superstitious understanding about human experience. I had no idea. So I was working on the premise, as we all are, that my circumstances were responsible for my well-being. It's implicit. That's how our society works. And it's not even that we believe that's true. It's more than that. We are that's true. Day to day, people are that. Their circumstances is where they will find their well-being. And then I think I was just lucky in many ways, although it didn't seem like it at the time. I just saw that couldn't possibly be true. Now, I then didn't have a new map. I just had a lot of confusion at the time and no idea who to talk to. And then, happy happenstance, if you like, came across the principles, and that started to fill in the sort of the blanks and give me a roadmap where I could navigate my life more effectively and more joyfully and more naturally. And I loved what you said about more in alignment with. Byron Katie has a phrase, doesn't she? She says, you'll suffer when you're at odds with reality, but only 100% of the time. And that's the base thing. Like when yesterday, I was arguing with reality. I didn't want this situation to be going on. I didn't want the people handling it the way they were handling it. I didn't want them. It's crazy, really, when I look back at it. I didn't want them speaking to me in the way that they spoke to me. You know, all the stuff. I was at war with reality, and guess who suffered? Me. I mean, okay, Costa got another customer and a cup of tea out of it, but do you know what I mean? Like, it was an entirely, and when you start to see that, that can be confronting to start with. But I find it very hopeful to see that the author is only ever me. It's not everyone else, because otherwise I'd be in the world of trying to fix everybody else, which is tough. And I can wake up to my own nonsense, and I've woken up to it much better today than I did yesterday. I mean, yesterday I was just knocked. So it doesn't make you immune from
No,
human
absolutely.
experience. It makes
Yeah,
sense of it, you know.
yeah. I mean, and I think I can't, but I kind of find that massively reassuring that we kind of dip in and out of clarity, and so and I think I actually think it's meant to be that way. At times we're meant to be fully engrossed in our our delusion, and in the way that we are when we go to a film or a play or something like that. We're in the experience. We don't want to be completely detached, just of knowing I'm sitting in the cinema, and just you want to be wholly in it. And even more so in life. And I think.
Yeah, and paradoxically, it did start to get things sorted. It wasn't the most elegant way of doing it, but it did start to get things moving, and hopefully by tomorrow, we'll have a resolution. So again, and this is again, I think, really beautiful to see. There's, forget the fact that I can be a bit hot-headed, to say the least. There's a deeper intelligence moving through, and I don't have to rein myself in or worry about, should I have said that, shouldn't I have said that. It's what I said, and it's just what I said, and that's all that it is. And that's not an excuse to be bombastic or whatever, but it is a freedom. Like, I felt really passionately that these people were we're doing a disservice to our kids, and I don't like that. like because they're paying them quite a lot of money, and it's like, no, come on, help, support, resolve the situation. They need to be back in term in like 10 days time. So there's nothing wrong with cranking up the heat a little bit and getting people to do stuff. As you rightly said, it's not about becoming a bystander.
Yeah, and it's also not, I think, about being. Sometimes I will hear people say, especially in a group or something that I'm running, oh, it's really all about love. And to my mind, more experience of love is an outcome, but just to say it's all about love would be inaccurate. I think it's all about more clarity,
Totally. Yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
more connection with
Yeah.
who we are and what's available to us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I come back to Byron Katie again, right? It's all about whatever's in front of you. That's what it's all about. And if you want to make up a story about that's all about love, great, brilliant. But it's about what's in front of you and what needs to be handled in your life. And if that's sometimes reminding people of an obligation or taking a strong stand about something, all power, go for it. It isn't, to me, the principles aren't telling you what to do with your world. They're telling you how what to doing is constructed. They don't have an opinion on my temper. I mean, luckily for me.
Well, but before we we're sort of drawing to a close of our time, but before we do that, I would love to hear more about what what you are up to in the world, because I know, I mean, obviously I read out what you're doing as a coach and consultant, but I know also that this year you've qualified as a personal trainer, because I'm particularly interested also in illustrating to anyone who might be listening to this about what's on offer and how this understanding can help us in any practical task that we're on, or quest that we're on in the world. So I'd love to hear more about that, Dave.
Yeah, certainly. So the personal training thing, I'm just in the final throes. My final exam is a week on Monday, and my final practical is just in the last week of September, and then I'll have level 3. I've got level 2, but then I'll have level 3 qualification, and that that really came from a quite staggering experience just over a year ago, in January 24, and I was up training with a friend and being trained by his trainer, who's an ex-powerlifter and a really, really interesting guy. And we went into the gym, and he was just looking at me, and people look at you when they meet you, but he was looking at me in a way that not so many people would look at someone. And so I was watching him watching me, and I smiled, and I went over to him and I said, "You're not just looking at me; you're reading me, aren't you?" And he kind of went, "How do you know that?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a long story, but I said, you're seeing what I can do." And he went, "Yeah, and you're strong." And when he said those two words, it was like my head went, because unbeknownst to me, I must have had a whole bunch of superstitious thinking about getting older, the limits of what I can do, dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-da, forever I could carry on with that story. And I'd even shared that. I joined a new gym and I shared it with the trainer, and he just looked at me and he went, "You're strong." And then we trained, and I lifted like I'd never ever lifted in my whole life. And he took some bits of video or whatever, and I took them back to my trainer. I said, "All that stuff I told you about, be careful of my knees and this, that, and the other. Actually, this is a closer representation," and showed him the video. And he was like, "Holy moly, like, what is that?" So you can have, in a funny kind of way for me, and it'd be interesting to see what you think about this, the principles is the most practical and yet intangible thing I've ever come across.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I totally, it's been utterly transformative, and I stumbled across it about 15 years ago. I remain as kind of fascinated and grateful today, and in awe of what's revealed to me. But the intangible bit is definitely there too, and one of the challenges, I think, is becoming better about communicating it, whether that's verbally or, or in whatever way. And that's part, I feel that's part of my my job, if you like, or one that I've accepted. I mean, it's not imposed on me by anybody else, but that intangible part, it does make it a challenge, I think, but it's a challenge worth
There's a
meeting.
lovely, yeah, no, I love it. There's a lovely story, isn't there, about I can't remember who tells it, whether it's McNeill, but about having fresh water in a world that's thirsty, that's drinking salt water. And the challenge is that from the outside, it just looks like water. That's the challenge. So you go over to someone and they look thirsty, and you say, "Oh, I've got water," and they're like, "No, it's fine. I've got a bottle." What they don't know is it's full of salt. And I mean this obviously metaphorically. And you're like, "If you could just try this water." "No, no, no, I'm good, thanks." And so you kind of, it almost becomes a role in the world, in a sense of offering people water for those people who'd like to try some water. And if they want to try it, then you can tell them that they'll taste it and go, "Well, this is different." Yeah, it is different. Do you want to understand more about how it's different? And if they don't, they don't. It's all good. And that, for a long time, I went through the kind of zealous phase of, everybody needs to hear this. And then I started to sense my own misunderstanding in that, and found more freedom in everyone needs to hear this who would like to hear this. And everybody else is just fine. It's all good.
Yeah, all good. And Dave, I'm thinking that might be an appropriate place to leave this particular conversation, which I have enjoyed thoroughly. It's been very, very nice for me. Thank you again. I'm sure people listening would like to hear more about you and what you're up to. Where is the best place for them to go to?
Yeah, best place is probably connection on social media. Dave Kibby on Facebook, or Dave Loves to Lift on Instagram, but I think it's still Dave Kibby, really. That's where I post my sort of fitnessy journey stuff. Dave Kibby on LinkedIn, where I post about the businessy stuff. So yeah, social media, or you can just reach me at davekibby@gmail.com. That would work as well.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to having further conversations sometime in the future.